Welcome back to the Second and Short podcast where the entire playbook is open. I'm Josiah.
I'm Jacob.
No, I'm Hayden.
And a reminder for those of you who like to listen to audio only, the link for the Spotify will be in the description.
Yeah, so last week we did a repeat of our first ever episode. We did an AFC preview. That was obviously our launch. That was our pilot episode last year. We changed it up a little bit. We had some fun with it though. Let's do the same exact thing just with the NFC now. Maybe a little bit more interest. Are you okay? Josie's about to die
So
on
don't drink
air
water
right
at
now.
the beginning of the
Wow.
Drink
podcast.
water.
Ooh.
Whew.
Wrong.
Good, we're good. We're good.
You're choking like Detroit did last year in the NFC Championship.
Call me Arthur Smith's offense.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
See that? That's called a professional segue.
That's right.
So let's get right into it. Is Detroit the best team in the NFC? If not, who is?
I think it's, I mean, you got to assume at this point, like, as a Steelers fan, I think that Brandon Ayuk is going to sign with the Niners. And so there's no reason to believe that the Niners won't be the best team. I also am really high on the Eagles this year. So, are you talking about who's the best team or who's going to have the best record?
Who's the best team? We'll get to. We'll do a playoff prediction and see.
Okay.
and everything.
Yeah, I would say there's no reason to guess it's not the Niners still.
Yeah, I mean, if you believe in Brock Purdy and or at least believe that he's like a top half of the league quarterback, the rest of their roster is like just as good as anybody else's, if not the best. So, I mean, they're still probably the best. I mean, they've made it to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. So,
Yeah.
With the one they didn't being the NFC Championship, which Purdy hurt his elbow.
where
so.
McCaffrey was throwing passes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. I think Brock Purdy is a good quarterback. I'm a fan of Purdy.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to overcompensate for what he's not. And I'm not going to throw around the term game manager because it has a negative connotation whether it should or not. I think of that in a very positive way. It's hard to run the Shanahan offense. We've seen quarterbacks not be able to do it for a long period of time. Purdy excels at it. It's a contract year. He's eligible for a contract right after week 18. So technically, if he wanted to say, hey, I'm not playing in the wild card round unless a new contract comes, he could. I think that him and the Niners might disagree about where he's at on that financial range. He probably wants to be the next highest paid guy. He's looking at that 60 number. The Niners, let's say, they're more around 55. Brock Purdy is what he is.
Yeah.
He doesn't have some unbelievable talent. There's a reason why he was Mr. Irrelevant. Is he a very good quarterback? Yes. Is he a franchise quarterback? I think so. The problem is, if he starts to try and do too much, that's when we're going to start to see some of the flaws come out. I think that's where we get those 8 interception practices that we saw at the beginning of training camp. He's overcompensating for something. Be Brock Purdy. Be the point guard. Distribute the ball to Christian McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings. The list goes on and on. Be you. Don't try and do too much. If he tries to do too much, that's when we see a team like Detroit, like Philadelphia, start to come into play a little bit more often.
Well, wouldn't that also be a case that, being Brock Purdy is... I mean, you said he doesn't do anything exceptionally well. It's like he does Brock Purdy really well. It's like we saw somebody who... Nobody would argue that Brock Purdy has more talent than Trey Lance. Right? I don't think that there's anybody who would sit here and say, oh, no, the higher ceiling is definitely Brock Purdy. That's not the case.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Brock Purdy was able to do what Brock Purdy needed to do. And so, I get the point that, the intangibles maybe aren't the same. But at the same time, as long as he can stay out of his own way, his ceiling, in my opinion, is much higher than Jimmy Garoppolo's. And Jimmy Garoppolo got them to a Super Bowl and lost.
Yeah.
And so, I think that, maybe the floor is lower, but I think that his ceiling is higher than Jimmy Garoppolo's for
Yeah,
sure.
it's
So,
interesting you mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo because I think I just seen a graphic. It was something like their first 23 starts. Him and Garoppolo are nearly identical in stats, and it's 2 guys, very similar play styles, running the same system with a really great roster, are gonna produce in the same kind of way.
Yeah, for sure. And they didn't ask a lot of Jimmy. He threw the ball 8 times in the NFC Championship game, but when he did throw the ball, typically, other than overthrowing Emmanuel Sanders, he got the ball where it needed to go.
Yeah.
And I think that in today's NFL is a lot of quarterbacks with accuracy problems in today's NFL. And I
for
think
sure.
that being able to accurately, hit the ball where it needs to go is something that's very valuable.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Lions depth chart, and there's not a weakness at all. Quarterback, above average. Running back, definitely above average. Maybe the best running back duo in the league. Jameer Gibbs probably going to take that next step. Receivers, I think that they're fine. I think Jamison Williams breaks out this year. If not, Sam Laporta.
Who's wide receiver 3? I don't even know.
Raymond. Khalif Raymond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's decent? I mean, he's not bad by any means.
Solid third.
Offensive line, arguably the best in the league. Aiden Hutchinson, going to develop. The interior got better. You have Aleem McNeil, and then you signed DJ Reader. Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone in the linebacking court. The secondary, atrocious last year. They can't get worse. They're probably going to get better with young guys like Tyrion Arnold, Brian Branch, and Kirby Joseph. You also bring in the veteran Carlton Davis. Oh, and yeah, there's another young guy there too, Ennis Rakestraw, the second rounder. There's not a weakness in sight. If they can overcome the mental obstacle that is the NFC Championship, they're going to be fine. That's a big if. I think Dan Campbell is the right coach to do it, but that's their number one issue, the mental hurdle. You had the Niners beat, and you blew it. The Niners didn't win that game. You lost it. If they can overcome that, it's hard to not go Detroit.
It's crazy that they were went from being, I mean, yes, this was years ago, being one of the only teams, at the time, the only team to ever go 0-16, to overcoming that mental hurdle, like you mentioned, like to being able to get to the NFC Championship game is just absolutely insane. And I do think a lot of it's a credit to Dan Campbell, but they also have a really good roster too. Who's their kicker?
Jake Bates, the UFL kicker.
Yeah, and he's not even bad either. So it's like,
It's not Badgley anymore.
No, Badgley got hurt. And,
Badgley.
No, Bates has been one of the consistent kickers.
Yeah. Who's their punter?
Um,
It's not Riley Patterson, is it? Who's Riley Patterson?
it is Jack Fox.
Oh, and he is.
Oh,
he's
Jack
a
Fox
dog.
is one of the
He's
best.
really good.
Yeah, he's one of the best.
So yeah, there's not really a hole at any point of the roster.
I mean, I'm not necessarily sold on their defense yet. I feel like there's like a lot to prove there, especially on the back end. But as far as like the front seven goes, I feel like they're pretty good. It's just the secondary for me would be like, okay, you have all these players that could be good. Now, will they like perform together this year?
And I think that they have the coaching staff to do it. Terrell Austin, I think he's been in the running for a head coaching job pretty much each of the last few years. That's probably going to continue to be the case this year. Josie, you know how I feel about Brian Branch. I think he's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler. Kirby Joseph has been good. Tyrion Arnold, first-round talent. Like, there are guys. Carlton Davis, when he's on, has been very good, coming off of a couple of down years. But
You think he was the better of the two corners in Tampa?
No.
Or do you think that
him or Jamel Dean?
Jamel Dean?
If you're going the last 2 years, Jamel Dean. If you're going the Super Bowl year, I think it's Carlton Davis, and it's not close.
I feel like they went back and forth so often. It's like who was the real number one there?
Yeah.
And it's not, but neither one of them was bad. But I would say they were both probably CB2s. So you really, in that scenario, hope that he can be like a CB3 even. If Rakestraw can take a step and like you hope that Terry Arnold is the dog that he is. Like you hope that he can be a rotational piece or even maybe a slot.
And that's the thing, though. How many teams have a true number one corner? I would venture to say not many.
Probably 12-ish.
I would say 12-ish.
12 probably a safe number.
And so that's kind of where, and you'll kind of notice a couple of those number one corners might end up being on the same teams. Also, is another way I would venture to go. But I think it's Detroit or San Fran. Not a wrong answer, really. Philadelphia, the talent's there. The problem is, speaking of mental hurdles, if you melt down at 9-1, what are you going to do when you have to restart? You don't have those 9 wins in your back pocket.
Yeah.
Kind of seems like a crapshoot year. Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, something's wrong with their relationship. It might be being overblown, but where there's smoke, there's fire with this type of thing.
Yeah.
And like we got to talk about Dallas too, because like that's another 12-win team almost every year now. I think
CD.
CD's gonna play. Like CD's gonna get signed. He's gonna be there. Like
see his I mean his Instagram stories have been wild for some. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but like the dude is ready to be a villain. Like did you see the Spider-Man thing where like he was like acting like he's the black Spider-Man, the black suit Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I
Venom.
should clarify what I'm talking. No, it's I mean it is
Miles
technically
Morales.
Venom, but yes,
Oh,
it was,
okay.
yeah.
I don't
So
know.
like he's ready to be the villain in the situation, in my opinion.
I don't know how I feel like a lot of that like nowadays a lot of people play those like games on social media, so it's like, you know,
it's a weapon that the players have.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's no reason why like he'll definitely, in my eyes, I think he'll be there at least by like week 2 or 3. Like they'll get a deal done. Like I'm sure like week 1 will happen. Maybe they'll get upset and lose to the Browns, and then they'll be like, okay, we got to pay CD if he doesn't get signed before the season
Hold on
starts.
till week 5. Hold on till after week 5, because then the Steelers can get an easy dub against that CD-less Dallas Cowboys.
Hey, but like, you know, you look at Dallas. I mean, obviously their main concerns are, okay, is their head coach like gonna call a good game plan? Like, is he gonna like call a game right, use his timeouts well? You know, like that's one of his big knocks is like game management, clock management. But other than that, like they're a very similar team. Like they have good wide receiver room, especially with CD. Like Dak's there, who's you would say he's top 8 at least quarterback in the league. The running back room obviously not the strongest from what it used to be like 4 years ago, but like really solid tight end room. Their O-line's still one of the better ones in the league, even though it's not as strong as it used to be. Still really good. And then you have Micah Parsons, Trevon Diggs, some other guys on defense like.
Yeah.
Dan Quinn's still there? No, he's coaching the Commanders.
He's the Commanders coach.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think the Cowboys are in trouble. I think Mike McCarthy's the least of their worries.
Right.
So let's say CD comes back. The personnel is not what it used to be. This offensive line is rough. You still got Zach Martin.
Yeah.
Their starting center is Brock Hoffman. I don't know who that is, and I pride myself on knowing pretty much every player.
Yeah.
Tyler Guyton, their first round pick, who I'm a fan of, still not listed as a starter.
Is he guard? He was
He's
a tackle coming out
And
of
then
college.
they have
Tyler Guyton is listed at tackle, but he's
Okay.
not starting at guard or
and
tackle.
then they have that other Smith guy, right? Not
Tyler Smith.
Yeah,
Tyler,
Smith.
at the
He's
guards,
He's
they're
good.
fine.
Yeah.
But the center and both tackle positions, I do love Ferguson. CD's obviously incredible. Jalen Tolbert, though, Brandon Cooks, who kind of showed last year, it's not the same Brandon Cooks that what he used to be. Zeke, same thing. On the defense, I'll take the 2 corners and I'll take the edge rushers. Outside of that, I don't love anything. The interior of the defense is rough. That's why they had to trade for Jordan Phillips from their division rival. The off-ball linebacker, Eric Hendricks, old. It's going to be a tough one, I think.
Yeah, I think that the Cowboys take a step back this year personally, and
Yeah.
I say take a step back. They'll probably still be a wild card. But
Yeah.
you got to think that every other year
it's flipping between
It's
them and Philly. Yeah.
between them and Philly, and I think that it's Philly's year
Yeah.
not only
No, I would agree with
because
that.
Dallas won it last year, but I also think that you mentioned it, the lack of running game is like Zeke's old. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Dak threw the ball 45 times a game.
Yeah.
Basically every single game, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
No.
But you can't sustain victories over that long period of time. Like Mahomes had to have one of the greatest years in the history of the NFL in his rookie season
Yeah.
for them to win all those games. They had to outscore everybody. 45, 47 points. The Rams game on Monday night,
Yeah.
I don't know that the Cowboys are built to do that the way that the Chiefs were with Mahomes.
Yeah.
And so I think that they're going to get into some shootouts and they're going to end up losing those games. So
You mentioned the NFC East having a different winner each and every year. I kind of want to segue into our wild card team. And a reminder, we're not saying a team that's going to be in the wild card round necessarily. We're saying a team that could either have a really good year or a really bad year. The spectrum has such a far reach. Very high ceiling, very low floor. What if it's not Philly or Dallas? And no, I'm not talking about Daniel Jones and the Giants. But the Texans from last year were so intriguing because they had such low expectations. They were probably the one team that had 0 playoff aspirations, maybe other than the Patriots.
yeah.
They obviously shocked the world. You get a ton of 1 o'clock games on your schedule. That bodes well. The coach can build some consistency into the game plan throughout the week. I think that the 2 teams that really stand out to do that are the Bears and the Commanders. Because both teams probably have some pretty low pressure situations. Both teams should have some pretty high power offenses. First year defensive head coaches. There's some similarities between those 2 and the Texans from last year. I don't love it. I'd probably lean more towards the Bears, but also I don't think you can count out Washington from winning the East.
Yeah. And another team that I've noticed it on here is I think that the NFC South is still pretty wide open. Obviously, the Buccaneers had a pretty decent year last year. I think the Atlanta Falcons are kind of a big question mark right now too. Like you could see them being really good, but you could also see them being really bad. Like it's a really big question mark as to what exactly Kirk Cousins is going to be there.
And is he going to be ready week 1?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been waiting for X amount of years for Kyle Pitts to do anything. We've been waiting for Drake London to break out. Like we hope that they break out in this new offensive system. You know, I think that their defense is talented. I think they're young. Their secondary, they just added Justin Simmons on top of having Jesse Bates already. Go back 3 years and those guys were up there with Minka as talking about like the best safeties in the entire
I still
league.
think they are.
Yeah, they're still both studs in my opinion. And I mean, you've got AJ Terrell in that secondary too, who's a really solid corner, who's maybe in that conversation that we talked about.
I would say
he's a real
number
CB1.
one.
Yeah.
Jeff Okuda's out there, former first-round pick.
He's on Houston now.
Oh, he's on Houston now? Was he there last year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
D. Alford is their next cornerback.
Yeah.
It's funny how top-heavy they are, because those 3 guys in the secondary, probably second to none if you're just going off of the top 3.
Oh, absolutely.
After that, though, it's a drop-off.
They added Matt Judon.
Yeah,
like, literally just
Matt
this week.
Judon.
This last week, they just added Matt Judon. So it's like, all those things sound great in theory, but at the same time, it's like you have to be able to put it together. You have to have good leadership from the coaches. You have to have good schemes. Like, in the past, Atlanta's been super hot and cold. Like, outside of their Super Bowl run, like, I think Atlanta's been super underwhelming basically the entire
They have a losing
time
record since.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to go back. I'm glad you brought up the Commanders because that was one of my wild card teams. And when you look at their roster, like even over the last few years when they haven't really had a quarterback or they haven't had like a first-round pick or they haven't had some guy there, right? Their teams have been competitive in all their games, especially their defense has always been talked about like top half of the league. But now you've got a guy like Jaden Daniels who can make plays with his feet. Their receivers are good. Like Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson is a very good 1-2. And then you draft Ben Sinnott first tight end off the board?
No, Brock Bowers was the first.
Other than Brock Bowers, sorry.
He was late second? No.
No. He might have been into the first or he was like the first and second. What? Was he not a second round pick?
I think he was the 3rd.
He was because they picked in the second pick in the second round. They didn't take him.
Yeah, I just other than I forgot about Brock
No,
Bowers,
Naples was right. Pick 53.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So did they trade back up or what happened? It doesn't matter.
It
doesn't matter.
Anyway,
It doesn't.
yeah, but like then you've got Dan Quinn there, who I think's a like solid. Like I think he's a top coach, not like top 5, but like
defensive.
middle line, above average coach, especially on defense. Like they can compete, especially like when you're playing. Like we talked about Dallas. You've talked about question marks with Dallas. We know the Giants are going to be terrible. That honestly might be the worst NFC team.
I mean, it has a case.
It has a case, especially the way Daniel Jones is playing. But like they're a really sneaky team. And I like that you brought up the Bears because I actually got a different NFC North team that I think is very sneaky, and I'm looking at the Vikings. Okay, Sam Darnold for what he was with the Jets, not very good, but showed flashes at times, right? Never had any weapons around him really. Like you look at the people he had,
the ghosts.
like we're talking about Jamison Crowder type wide receiver ones in New York, like no offensive line. Didn't have Breece Hall there. Like, he had no one.
Yep.
Now you put him in a situation with a great offensive scheme with Kevin O'Connell. TJ Hawkinson will be back, but you talk about Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, people he's throwing to.
Aaron Jones
to take a lot of load off, like in the backfield.
If he comes back.
Yeah, and then the way that the Vikings have turned around their defense from like 2 years ago has been extra. Like they've drafted extremely well. They were able to trade back up and get Dallas Turner on the edge. They brought Harrison Smith still there. Didn't they bring in another safety?
They brought in Stephon Gilmore.
Or they brought in Stephon Gilmore on that back end.
Their DC still
Brian Flores is like a really good DC. Like even when he was in Miami, like their teams are good. And was he in Pittsburgh?
He was a defensive assistant. That. He wasn't actually the DC.
But like I really like what the Vikings are doing, and Sam Darnold has shown that like he can do stuff. So I think you go on some of these runs, some of these insanity quarterback runs. Like there's no reason why like Sam Darnold couldn't get them to like 5-2, 5-3, and then you're talking about okay, are the Vikings a wild card team with Sam Darnold?
I agree.
I don't disagree at all. I just think that I have trouble trusting Sam Darnold, and from what I've seen of him in like videos and stuff,
That's fair.
videos,
Yeah, that's fair.
he's looked good.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, but again,
There's
it's
a
very
reason why
small
he was
clip.
viewed as
Yeah.
the next guy. He was
Yeah.
the prodigy
Oh, yeah.
quarterback.
Yeah. But I think it's still the question mark of, and that's kind of to your point, is that like, what's he gonna be?
Yeah.
We don't really know.
Yeah.
We can talk to her blue in the face about his potential, but
Mhm.
which I'm sick of hearing about potential as a Steelers fan with the guy that we currently have in there. But like, I mean, you can talk about potential to her blue in the face, but like, I want to see him get on the field and do it.
Yeah.
He has all the weapons.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
the offensive line's better than it was with the Jets. I wouldn't say it's like top
Yeah.
half. It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
but-
if you're looking at just tackles, Brian O'Neill and Christian Darris are two of the best at their
Yeah.
respective tackle positions. The interior a little bit more of a question mark, but you have an offensive minded head coach, and that can't be understated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So,
Can we go back to the Falcons? Because this is what frustrates me.
mhm.
They've done a lot of good. They've also done a lot of bad.
No.
And stuff like that makes me not trust teams. Big Cat from Barstool coined the phrase to Mike Florio once, dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things.
Yeah.
And the Falcons have been doing a heck of a lot of dysfunctional things. First, turning down Bill Belichick. So that just turning down the GOAT of the sport, probably not a great idea in terms of football karma. The football gods probably are going to frown upon that.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't get better from there. I can't tell if they're trying to contend for a Super Bowl or rebuild. So you've made some pretty good moves for a contender. You have some skill positions that you're trying to develop. Pitts, London, and Bijan. Tyler Algier is also more than capable. You bring in Kirk Cousins. He was going to be MVP last year. He was that good. Raheem Morris, solid head coach. Not Bill Belichick, but he deserved a shot. Not a bad hire by any means. So everything's pointing up. You're in a pretty weak division where we're going to talk about the Bucks because we seemingly are half Bucks fans, especially me and Josie.
Yeah.
But everything seems to be going well.
Put you on there too. Hey,
Yeah?
there's room on the train,
Hey.
brother. There's room
Hey,
on the
I'm
train.
high on the Bucks. I like them to win the division this year, but we'll talk about that later.
You draft Michael Penix. Josie, you watched me fold my body right to the right of you. It just absurd. And I don't hate the fit. I think drafting Michael Penix would have been fine.
Yeah.
But why did you just give $100+ million guaranteed to a quarterback? Yeah. It just doesn't make sense. It's not similar. We haven't seen teams try and build for the future and contend for a Super Bowl at the same time. That doesn't work. It has never worked.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. Neither one would have been a bad option for Atlanta, I don't think.
Yeah.
But, and then they continue it into the preseason, doing dysfunctional things. In terms of just adding Justin Simmons and Matthew Judon, great pickups.
Yeah.
Justin Simmons, I think, still a top 10 Pro Bowl level safety. Matthew Judon, injury riddled year last year, but he averaged a sack per game plus a really good run stopper.
Yeah.
The problem is, so you have a franchise quarterback where you're trying to win now. Trading for Matthew Judon and then not giving him a long-term quarterback, but giving up a third-round pick, which is substantial compensation for a guy who played 4 games last year and is in his 30s with a contract expiring, that's a win-now move. Are we not trying to build around Michael Penix and making sure that he has weapons? Because that receiving room, there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Drake London, talent's there, but let's say even he does work out. Then you have Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore.
Well, he's on IR. He's done for the season.
More?
Rondell Moore's out for the
So-
season. Yeah.
Just dysfunctional things. What they did this past preseason week. You don't play Michael Penix at all. After a pretty decent first week, he wasn't thrown into the fire or anything.
His deep ball looked good, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what you expect.
That's all they needed to see.
But-
though. Yeah, they just need to see that. Well, ready. Bench for the next 2 years. You're ready.
Like-
Hey, we're ready.
Like, if everything goes according to plan, he's not playing at all this year. At least according to what we think their plan is. No one seems to really know.
Yeah.
So why aren't we trying to flood him with reps? There are a couple different possible explanations. None of them are good. Maybe Kirk Cousins isn't ready to go, but they don't want to start him week 1 against Pittsburgh and TJ Watt.
Yeah.
Going Taylor Heineke. Like, just, it seems like they're winging it right now, and that is horrible. As someone who has studied PR, it's frustrating. As someone who has watched football for a majority of their life, it is frustrating because there's talent on this team.
Oh, yeah.
I forget which one of you said it, but we could see them winning the division and maybe even winning a playoff game.
Yeah.
But the dysfunctional crap that seems to be starting at the very top makes me undermine the whole entire talent on the personnel side.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And I think you touched on it really good. I think if they bring in like a Gardner Minshew or a Joe Flacco, everything else makes a lot more sense. Like you
A
draft
bridge
Penix.
quarterback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you draft one of the guys, especially who sell seats. Like Joe Flacco, after what he did last year, or Gardner Minshew, are both guys that are like they can sell seats. Like they're not selling out stadiums, but like even when Gardner Minshew was with the Jags, like the Jags were selling seats. Like they weren't good. They weren't a good team, but they were selling seats because of Minshew.
Heck, the guy that Josie was complaining about before, Justin Fields.
Yeah,
The Steelers gave up a 6 that could turn into a 3rd.
yeah,
Atlanta could have easily done that.
Yeah.
Like, just
And this is a similar conversation. Obviously, I'll talk about the difference in the two. Is like whenever the Packers took Jordan Love, and everybody was questioning it, but the difference is they had a guy that was there already. They didn't go out and get Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers and then draft a guy in the same offseason. They had Rodgers there, extended him, and then drafted Jordan Love, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Like I think they extended him the same offseason that they drafted Love. I could be wrong about that. But it was
I don't
close.
think they did. I think
So,
it
was
would have been the
close.
year before. I
Yeah,
think.
I think
Year
they gave
before.
like a 2 or 3.
And so it's like I get the you want your quarterback to sit and develop and things like that. If they're trying to copy what the Packers did, great. The way they did it was just super questionable. Like the fact that they went out and paid all this guaranteed money and
Yeah.
gave him a 4-year contract or 3 for Kirk Cousins.
I think it was 4.
It was 4 years, yeah. And so it's like
4, but they can get out after 2.
yeah, and there's going to be questions. So it's not a perfect comparison, but like everybody questioned the Packers when they did it
Yeah,
too.
for
It
sure.
seems so far outside of what Naples thinks that it's working out again a similar
Yeah.
way that it did with the Packers the first time. So
Well.
maybe they're trying to be the Packers. I don't really know.
But like you said, Aaron Rodgers was there.
Mhm.
Like he had been their guy. The Falcons made a decision to sign a franchise quarterback
Yeah.
2 months before they drafted another one. It's like, add on the fact Michael Penix is flipping 24 years old.
Yeah.
This guy has played so much college
Not a
football.
spring chicken.
No, not a. He isn't going to learn too much more sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
He has played. He has seen things. That's probably one of his strengths. Jordan Love coming out was raw. He had a really good second to last year at Utah State. His
He was
final,
young, wasn't he?
yeah, his final year at Utah State, you saw some problems with the turnovers. Otherwise, he might have gone even higher in the draft. He was young. He was viewed as this super raw, talented prospect. He has a Mahomes-like arm. He can run. He's all of these things. Michael Penix probably has a little bit higher of a floor, lower of a ceiling than Jordan Love. He's ready to play right now. It,
Which is why I think I've said this on the pod before. Like I think the Raiders were going to take him at what were they 13?
Yeah,
the 13th
they-
pick, but he was gone, and so they ended up taking Brock Bowers, which I think Brock Bowers was going to go to the Colts at 15, and so like it had this whole ripple.
Colts were
effect
working to
of-
trade up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like I think it just had this ripple effect because nobody saw it coming
Yeah.
that they were going to take him at 8. Which, to be fair, if you remember the draft, nobody saw the Packers. Did they trade up to get Love? They did.
I think so.
They traded
Yeah,
forward
yeah,
in the
they
draft to
traded
make sure
up,
that they
yeah.
got Love.
They gave up like a 4th-round pick to move up a few spots, I think.
Yeah.
One last thing before we start talking about some other teams. Matthew Judon. He was rumored to have been able to choose to go to either Atlanta or Chicago. He chose Atlanta. I don't know if I agree with that. Because is Atlanta a better situation than New England? Yes. But Chicago, the way that offense supposedly is going to be putting up points, you have a defensive-minded head coach at both spots. But in Chicago, the really big piece, you have Montez Sweat on the other side. You have a guy who's going to get 10 sacks on the other side, supposedly to make your life easier. The Falcons' next edge rusher, I think, is Arnold Abidike. Do you guys know who that is?
Nope.
And I'll fact-check myself right now. But he's a third-year outside linebacker at Penn State. His career high is 6 sacks. That's not Montez Sweat.
Yeah.
So if contract wasn't a factor, because it doesn't seem like he's getting a contract soon, I would have gone to Chicago.
Yeah.
Part of the reason, because the Falcons seem like a dysfunctional mess right now.
I mean, I think that it was so him forcing his way out of New England. I think was a contract thing, but the quote I think that came out from him was that like the Falcons have only ever seen his film. He's never put anything on the field for them. So like he's not going to sit out and demand a contract now because he's in a new situation. He wants to go out and prove that he deserves a contract. So I do think that it's about the contract, but I don't think that he's holding the.
But he
Falcons
wasn't going to get a
the
contract
same-
at Chicago or Atlanta, so that can't be in play
Right.
now.
But I think that based on who Chicago has and who they have to pay, I don't think he would get as high of a payday as he would in Atlanta. Again, I maybe that's his thought process. I'm
That's
not
a
gonna
big
pretend to
if,
know his
though.
thought process. Yeah, but they also just extended DJ Moore. They have Montez Sweat, who I don't remember what his contract was, but it wasn't small.
Yeah.
And they gave it to him before he ever played a snap there, if I remember correctly. They traded for him and then paid him immediately. And you've got Jalen Johnson just got paid there too.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, he could also just look at Atlanta and
Yeah.
he could just personally think that's a better situation.
Yeah.
And like, okay, maybe he thinks Atlanta's in a better spot to win now. Like they're in an easier division, like easier path to the playoffs. Maybe he's thinking, okay, Kirk Cousins is here. They brought him in for a reason. Like these next 2 years, like we want to win a Super Bowl. So like that could also be his thought process.
Yeah.
Like this is a situation to win now.
or maybe it's just all about money right now.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, hey, some players only like at the end of their career they're trying to make as much.
But I
money
think
as they
he's going to be
possibly
set
can.
up to make more money if he would have played opposite of Montez Sweat.
Yeah.
With
You're
the
going to get
BC
more sacks opposite of Montez Sweat. More sacks equals more money.
Right, but like if he can go out and get 10 sacks for the Atlanta Falcons this year for the first time they've ever had somebody do that in 5 seasons, you don't think they're going to pay him top dollar?
But what makes you think he can't?
I mean-
he's gotten 10 sacks in the past.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he
But
will, I'm
I
just
think
saying,
I
like,
think he has a
he's
chance
got-
to go
he's
to
got
10
other
sacks
stuff.
or more in Chicago.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think there's question marks. I'm not going to pretend to know his thought process, but like we could conjecture about what it is all day long. But I don't know.
I have one more team that I want to throw out as a wild card team, and I think this is a definition of a wild card team because I think that they might be the worst team in the conference. With that said, I think that they might have the best chance in the entire NFL to go worst to first. And I'm talking about the Carolina Panthers.
I was wondering if someone was going to bring him up. I thought about bringing him
The-
up, but go ahead.
The NFC South sucks. I said it last year. I'm going to say it again this year. It's the most mid-division in football.
Yeah.
I like the Bucks. I like some of what the Falcons are doing. The problem is the stuff I don't like about the Falcons. I really don't like. The Saints, irrelevant. Like, trash. I mean, Derek Carr. What else do you want me to say?
Former almost MVP.
Hey,
Him and Dennis Allen are getting fired by week 8.
I think he
so.
led the league in like passing touchdowns like over the last 6 weeks or something over last year, something like that. Maybe not the whole league, but maybe just the NFC.
He's got that dog in him.
Hey,
so,
big dog.
He's boof. I don't know what to tell you. So we're gonna throw the Saints out of it. Carolina, I don't love it. I think they're placing a lot of bread into
the Bryce Young basket.
a Bryce Young that isn't surrounded with a ton of talent. Deontay Johnson banged up. All right, JT
Well,
Sanders.
85,
JT
I was
Sanders.
gonna say Deontay and JT and Adam Thielen. I feel like that's
yeah,
strong.
They say
That's
Xavier
strong.
Leggett.
Oh, and Xavier Leggett, first round.
They've got a lot of unknowns, which
Yeah,
is
for
why they are a wild card team.
Yeah, and listen, I love Adam
Line
Thielen.
sucks.
He had it. Well, here's the thing.
And the defense.
I'm glad you
Lions,
said.
Lions bottom 5, right? Like,
Defense
that
stinks.
line is bottom 5 in the league.
Well,
I want to talk about pass rushers. Who's the Panthers' top pass rusher?
Brian
Jadavian
Burns.
Clowney.
It's Clowney. Yeah.
All right, so this offensive line is the most expensive line in football, and I don't know that for sure, but let's go through it. And it's because they added 2 $100 million guards. So I do want to. So
that's right.
left tackle
That's
Ikem Ekwonu, the NC
He's
State
good.
guy. I
Yeah,
do
he's
like
good,
him.
yeah.
I don't think we've seen his best football yet, but I like him. He's
Yeah,
a
he's
bright
solid.
spot. Left guard Damian Lewis, guard they signed from the Seahawks. He's making close to $20 million a year.
Yeah.
Above average, not
Yeah.
making that much money. And if you're paying a lineman who's never made a Pro Bowl before that much money, I'm not bought in. Let's just say that. I know Pro Bowl's not everything, but Pro Bowl's a model of consistency for the offensive line specifically. Austin Corbett, above average center. He's not making a ton of money compared to the other 4 guys. Robert Hunt. I don't trust any lineman that comes from a McShanahan offense. He comes from Miami. Guess what? Offensive linemen and running backs look a lot better than what they are when you're a part of that offense. Robert Hunt is not a $100 million player, please. Taylor Moden at right tackle, above average, but still. I don't know for a fact that that's the most expensive offensive line,
No.
but I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
because you got 2 high-paid tackles, You got two of the highest paid guards, and then you got a center who's not on a rookie contract.
Yeah. I forgot that they added those guards. That was his offseason that they added both, wasn't it?
I do want to point out to you, JT Sanders is currently listed as the number 3 tight end.
He's a rookie.
Yeah, it's just semantics.
I mean,
yeah.
who is he behind? Say
Mabel.
I know who they are, but say the names.
Tommy Tremble.
Who?
Tommy Tremble.
Exactly. Somebody who's ahead of
Go
JT
ahead,
Sanders.
Is Ian Thomas the other one?
Ian Thomas is the other one.
Exactly. Outside of Panthers fans, nobody knows those guys' names. The guy who I'm talking about,
We
the
didn't
guy
know.
who I'm talking about was like a couple snaps away from being in the national championship game last year.
So,
So he's a household name already.
Yeah.
okay. All right, moving on to the defense. And that's the thing with the offense. I like Bryce Young. I think Naples is a fan of Young as well.
Yeah.
I'm not a believer. I have hope for Bryce Young. I don't have faith in Bryce Young. And
I would agree.
Dave Canales has worked miracles the past 2 years with talented quarterbacks. Could he do it again this year? Yeah, he could. Or he could be completely overwhelmed and have David Tepper breathing down his neck and he's fired before the season starts or ends.
So
So
David Tepper kind of works against them in all cases. So.
yeah, let's go over the defense because it's not much better. It might be worse. We got Derek Brown, very good interior defensive lineman.
And that's it.
Pretty much, yeah. You got J.C. Horn in the
JC
back
Horn's
end.
solid.
Right now, their starting corner, other two corners are Troy Hill in the slot.
He's just old.
Yeah, he's
Way
not.
past his prime.
If we're going through slot corners, there's a lot better than Troy Hill. And then Dane Jackson, hail to Pitt.
He was a
He was a Bill. Yeah, because the Bills have like 5 Pitt cornerbacks on their roster at all times. You got Jordan Fuller, another former Ram, going along with Troy Hill, and Xavier Woods as the safeties.
Yeah.
Okay then.
We can talk about Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates. Let's talk about those guys. Those are
Yeah.
top,
Well,
those top of
that's
line.
the thing. The safety has become devalued because there's so many good ones.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go through my top 50 safety rankings, and it's gonna be a while before we get to Xavier Woods or Jordan Fuller. They might not be top 50. I'm honestly convinced we could name 50 or at least get close to that.
Probably.
All right, the off-ball linebacker. I actually don't hate this. I'll be nice. Jack Thompson, I think, is above average, and Josie Jewell is definitely above average. So I'll take those two. No problem there.
I think Jack Thompson's best days are behind him, but I think he's still solid. He can be a
Yeah,
solid
he's
starter.
still athletic. He's good. Then you get the edge rusher. You get Jadeveon Clowney, who,
Way past his prime.
yeah, whatever.
Run stopper for a reason.
What prime?
He was good with Houston.
He was okay.
Like,
He had J.J. Watt on the opposite.
He
side.
was the
that was his prime.
he was the almost sacked
Stopping
guy
the-
before
yeah.
Myles Garrett. He was the almost sacked guy
Okay.
before Myles
So the
Garrett.
guy on the opposite side of him was in the Steelers facility.
I don't know why you say almost sack guy like Myles Garrett doesn't like have the most sacks since he entered the league.
Because he doesn't.
He doesn't.
TJ
Does
Watt
he
does.
not?
TJ Watt.
No,
does.
since
They were the
Miles.
same-
They
No,
entered
they
the
were
same
in the
year.
same draft.
Were they?
Yeah.
Oh,
Both.
I thought TJ was one.
Pick 1 and pick 30.
Huh?
It's okay though.
Well,
Naples. You're
but
good. Anyways.
well, I mean, if Myles Garrett gets 10 sacks this season, he'll be the only guy other than Lawrence Taylor to do double-digit sacks for 5 straight seasons. I think that's it.
Maybe.
Oh,
I mean,
TJ missed. That's
Yeah,
right. He
yeah.
only had 7.5 that year. He missed.
and TJ still has more, even though he misses games.
Right.
But anyways,
Well, Miles got suspended for a couple games.
because he murdered somebody.
4 games.
He tried to murder somebody, so I think that was a fair punishment.
Hey, we're not talking about DK though. DK can swing helmets, no one
I
cares.
did see that.
I did not.
There
see
was
that.
no, you know what? No one's talking about DK swinging helmets.
Nobody.
What about Aaron Donald? Do you remember that
I mean,
against the
Put his
Bengals?
helmet on and went
Yeah,
back
I
in.
mean, it is a
No,
spectacle,
he
though,
swung a helmet and the
Yeah, I
helmet
remember that.
bent. The helmet bent. That's how hard he swung
Yeah.
it. No punishment.
I was gonna say, I remember. Well, it is fair though, because like Miles did it on a primetime game when everyone was watching, so and it was in a real game, so
Under
like,
the lights.
yeah.
I don't know. Someone could literally be killed by that.
Yeah.
Their other edge rushers, by the way, are DJ Wanham, who had an alright year for the Vikings last year. Kind of a pure pass rusher. Like, he's not going to offer too much on the run game. And then Kaylavon Chason, a bust out of LSU.
Who was with the Jags, right?
Yeah.
He got drafted by the Jags, yeah.
So, I don't know. Chuba Hubbard's there. You got Jonathan Brooks, Jonathan Mingo, and like, there are guys. If the Panthers are anything this year, I'm going to give a lot of credit to Dave Canales.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they necessarily will be, but also, like I said, I think they might have one of, if not the best chance to go worst to first simply because of how bad this division is. I think the only other team that might have a better case in them is Cincinnati, just because Cincinnati's that good. The problem is Cincinnati's competing with 3 other teams.
Yeah.
Who are all, I would venture to say all 4 of those teams probably win the NFC South.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the Panthers are, I mean, I do think that they're going to see a bigger upgrade from Bryce Young this year. But at the same time, it's like them going 7-10 is probably their Super Bowl for this year. Like, if they can get to 7-10, 8-9, like, that's a huge victory for them.
And I don't
based
think
on,
they're...
Yeah, realistically, they're probably 5-6 win team.
I was gonna say 4 or 5.
Yeah,
I just
like they're probably gonna have a top 5 pick again, which is actually good. It works in their
good for
favor
them.
because then they can go out and get the best pass rusher in next year's draft. So like, I mean, could I see them being better than last year? Last year, yes, they should be better than last year. But at the same time, because like their best pass rusher that they had last year, to be fair, got ejected from 3 games, 2 games
Got
at
ejected
least.
from 3.
It
I
was-
don't remember.
It was at least
this.
2, yeah. Brian Burns, yeah. And so like we can fact check that, but like.
Well, I want to play a little
They
game.
were questionable even
Alright.
last year.
So we're going to go through pretty quickly because I do want to get to our playoff teams. But we're just going to go through Carolina's schedule and say win or loss. Okay? And we'll give them I forget, we did this with the Texans, I think, because I'm lower on them the most, even though I actually really like them. But, all right, week 1 at Saints. I'm going to say they lose. And that's coming from a Saints hater. It's in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
New Orleans defense is going to be ready. They're going to lose that game. Chargers, week 2.
Loss.
Why are they gonna lose?
Well, because
Chargers are a better team.
You,
Hard ball?
yeah, I'm hard for ball. Yeah. All right, week 3 Raiders at Raiders, cross country, probably a toss up.
If it's at Raiders, I'd take the Raiders.
But if we're gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, can we give them a dub here? We're gonna give them the benefit. Could you? It's
I mean, I could see them winning that
yeah,
game.
it's like a toss up. Wouldn't
Yeah.
you say?
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
it's a pick-em game.
Bengals loss.
Yeah.
Bears probably loss.
But
I mean, Chicago's probably gonna lose some games that they shouldn't.
I was gonna say, if you remember last year when the Texans were like starting to get hot, the Panthers beat the Texans, and it was like C.J. Stroud versus Bryce Young. You know.
Yeah.
Falcons. I could see Carolina.
They play them
Josie's
twice.
favorite thing. It's a divisional game.
Yeah.
Division games are always tough.
I mean, they're probably gonna split. If I'm being honest.
Probably.
Commanders.
Probably lose.
I don't know. I think
You were on
Carolina.
the Commanders earlier.
I'm not. I think that they're a wild card team. The Commanders, I think, are riding off of a high because that they don't have Dan Snyder. I think no matter what they do, they're just like, oh, at least we don't have Dan Snyder.
Yeah.
I don't love Dan Quinn. I don't love the fit. I want an offensive minded head coach if I have a rookie quarterback.
Wow.
Giants win, so they're at like 3-ish now. Chiefs loss. Buccaneers, they still get twice. Maybe they split there. Eagles loss. Cowboys. that
Yeah.
that seems like a Cowboys trap game. Cardinals.
Loss. I like the Cardinals this year. We didn't mention them as far as wild card teams, but I think they're like a legit like 9-win team.
If Kyler can
Nine
stay
win.
9 or 10, yeah.
if Kyler can stay healthy and Marvin Harrison is what everybody thinks he is,
Yeah.
I mean, they still have some pieces on defense. I mean, some.
So
I mean, they played teams tough last year.
They did.
They played everybody tough.
Their defense played much better than they should have last year.
So Josie, I would agree with you. I think that their ceiling, Carolina, I'm talking about probably 7 or 8 wins.
Yeah.
And that's their ceiling. The thing is, that might be good enough to win the South, to be honest. Like that's what we're looking at in terms of the South.
Yeah.
So, all right.
That would be wild to have a 7-win team win the division.
It's happened before in the
I
South,
know.
7 and
I
10,
know.
like
but I don't
But,
know.
I mean,
I
it's
feel like
7
with the
and
extra
9.
game, I feel like I don't
Did it?
know.
Was it 7-9 out of the South?
Yeah, it was the Panthers
Huh.
yeah. Okay.
with Cam Newton.
That's right. It was the year after they went 15
I
and
think
1.
Yeah,
someone
they won it
almost got
again.
in at 6-10 and 1.
That's wild.
Like, all right,
Well, there wouldn't have been 17
6,
I think that last year.
6.
because it would have been 17 games.
You're right. So
So it would have been 6-9 and 1.
6, 9, and 1. Yeah.
I got you. I know what you
All right. Division winners. Which division do you want to start with, and we'll just go down the line.
we're just, okay.
And I feel like we should start with the East.
We can start with the East. I'm going Philly.
I also go Philly.
Philly.
I feel like that was
Yeah.
an easy one.
It's.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this before. It's like the Giants and the Commanders. I think the Commanders are on the uptick. I think the Giants are probably a bottom 5 team in the league right now. It's going to go back and forth between the Cowboys and the Eagles for at least the next 3 seasons, and then maybe you could talk about the Commanders being in that conversation. If the Cowboys lose Dak Prescott this offseason, okay, maybe that conversation completely changes to this is the Eagles' division. But I think that there's no reason to believe that the Cowboys and the Eagles aren't going to continue going back and forth.
Yeah.
So,
Maples, keep on going. What division you want to do
Alright,
next?
Let's do the South since we were just talking about it, and I like Tampa. I think they won it last year. I think Baker only gets better with another year with the same guys, getting a rhythm and connection with them. I think Mike Evans is still an amazing wide receiver. Probably goes for 1,200, 1,300 yards again this year. Chris Godwin stays healthy. He's still a solid slot receiver. Like I like a lot of the things that the Bucs can do, and like defensively, like they're still a solid defensive team. So I like them out of this division.
yeah. I mean, they still have one of the best tackles in the league. They went out and got a center.
Antoine Winfield just got extended.
Brand Barton, is that his name?
Yeah,
The
my
center?
boy.
Yeah, I was gonna say I knew you were real high on him.
Yeah.
You wanted the Steelers to take him instead of. You wanted them to take him instead of.
Fodnu.
Fontanu. I do like the Buccaneers, but for I think that I don't want it to be a sweep, and I think it might be if I go them. So I'm gonna actually go with the Falcons here. Again, super wild card team in my opinion, but I there's no reason to believe that Kirk can't come back and just be even
Yeah.
a shell of himself enough to win that division.
Yeah.
So I'm going Falcons.
That's fair. I mean, I think it's between those two for sure.
I want it to be the Bucks. I joked that I'm a half Bucks fan earlier. Huge believer in Baker Mayfield. I like a lot of their pieces. The problem is, I don't think Todd Bowles is going to be there for long, and I think that there's kind of an overwhelming feeling of that in the locker room already. I think that last year, if he loses to Philly in the wild card round, he gets the can, because I think they wanted to promote Dave Canales in order to prevent them from losing him. They've done it before. They fired Lovie Smith a little bit earlier than they should because they wanted to keep Dirk Cutter in the building.
Yeah.
I think that they were really tempted to do the same thing. Going to the divisional round made that too much of a PR nightmare. Heck, the way Todd Bowles lost that game in Detroit by not calling any of his timeouts at the very end might have given them a little bit of leeway to do so. Wouldn't be surprised if it's Tampa. Sean Tucker's going to have 1,000 yards this year. I am going to go Atlanta as well. I could see any team other than the Saints winning this division. I think that all 3 of those teams have a bright future other than the Saints.
You're such a hater.
I'm serious.
I wouldn't even be surprised if the Saints win this division. Like they have just as much talent on both sides of the ball as every other
The
team in
Saints
this
season
league.
is lost.
What?
Dennis Allen's not going to be the coach after this year.
No, I don't
At the
like.
same
I don't
time,
like
you could
that.
make the
He's
case
not.
that the
Derek
Saints-
Carr's not going to be the quarterback after.
Yeah, but you could-
All 3 other teams have at least something to look forward to. If you're the Saints, you're still living off of a Super Bowl from 2009.
Hey.
A quarterback who's not there anymore. A head coach who's not there anymore.
If they all know they're not going to be there, they're playing with house money. They're just, hey, this is our year. Put everything on tape. Let's go get contracts somewhere else.
I'll use an argument that you used earlier. You can make the case that the Saints are better at every single position than the Panthers. At every single position. Wide receiver, quarterback,
Running
offensive line,
Not
running back.
not interior defensive line.
Okay, the one spot.
I mean,
But
is
even then,
Sheldon
Cam
Rankins,
Jordan could play in the middle.
is Sheldon Rankins still there?
No.
No?
He hasn't
Okay.
been there in a while.
Yeah.
I thought he was still
He
there.
was drafted there, but
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
been all over.
But like, I mean, outside of
Offensive
defensive
line,
interior-
Carolina might be better too.
Oh.
Dude, the Saints offensive line, Trevon Penning, have you seen Trevon Penning?
No. Oh yes.
He
I
is
have.
back.
But
He
also
is back.
because Ryan Ramczyk can't play. I'm counting Ramczyk in that.
Well, guess what? He's out for the year, so I don't know what to tell you.
But
All right.
also, like, they got, like, what, Cesar Ruiz and
Their
who's the
defense
other
is
center
nice,
that
too.
they have?
I mean, they're better at linebacker and secondary.
Yeah.
Correct.
They are. You could make the case that the Saints are better everywhere except for interior defense.
The Saints have 2 out of the 5 spots good on the offensive line.
I mean, you could also
Talise
argue,
Fuaga, I think, is going to
Yes.
be good.
yeah.
Eric McCoy is a very good center.
Okay, so
Agreed.
Their left guard is Lucas Patrick, former Packers backup center. That's the Saints starting guard right now.
It's time to show up.
I mean, that's better than the starting center for the Panthers.
No, it's not. Cesar Ruiz and then Trevor Penning, my
Trevor
bad.
Penning,
See,
yeah.
he doesn't even.
He was a first-round pick, wasn't he?
Yeah, a bust of a
Abysmal.
player. He went to like a
Abysmal.
random like FCS D2 school, Northern Iowa. Yeah,
You could
awful.
even argue the Saints have the best defense in their whole division.
That's probably It's
It-
probably It's probably true.
I mean, they
don't have
I
a
mean, I
problem.
would say they have the most upside to be a top 10.
All right,
Yeah, I mean, I still like Marshawn Lattimore. Everybody
Yeah.
stop talking about Marshawn Lattimore. I still think he's probably
Oh,
top
he's
10.
so
who's
good.
better? And don't answer because I know who you think. Him or Denzel Ward?
If I have to choose one to be on my team, I'm taking Marshawn.
I mean,
I don't know. I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer.
I think
Yeah,
they're. I think
yeah.
they're both really like similar.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think that Denzel Ward is the best corner on the Browns anymore. I think
Who
David
is?
Martin Emerson is
Martin Emerson
so
You guys think he's-
good.
Martin Emerson is locked down.
He is.
Dude.
Martin Emerson is the best
If you
corner on the
were,
Browns roster.
if you
right
were
now.
watching him, I mean, you guys probably weren't, but joint
No, I don't-
practices with the
I
Vikings,
saw the videos.
he was
Locking him
clamping Justin Jefferson.
Martin
all
Emerson is
over
the best corner on the roster
I-
right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they extended him next offseason and like traded Ward.
I don't know. I like our little trio of corners
Yeah,
with
they're
Ward, Martin, and
I have another position where the Saints are worse than the
Okay.
Panthers.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
So hear me out.
Punter.
quarterback. Is he just gonna say quarterback?
Well, here's the thing. Bryce Young has more upside than Derek Carr.
I do
Derek
agree.
Carr's a
Derek
better
Carr's better.
quarterback right now, but I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, I still
who's,
think he'll have a better season than Bryce Young next year.
Yeah.
Just like
He-
he's better talent.
yeah.
I think Bryce Young has less interceptions, but I think that the overall production from the quarterback, I think Derek Carr has a
Yeah.
better season.
So Chris Olave is like really good at football.
Yeah.
If we're taking a whole entire wide receiver room,
Okay.
I mean, the Panthers have more depth.
Yeah, I would agree
like
with that.
Deontay has a 100 catch, 1,000 yard receiving season to his resume.
14 drops.
Okay, let me continue. Adam Thielen, 100 catches, 1,000
Hey,
yards last
I was
year.
gonna say, there's not a lot of quarterbacks, especially rookies, that can get a receiver to 1,000 yards, and Bryce Young got Thielen to 1,000 yards, which I think was actually pretty impressive last year.
Leggett, first round talent. The upside's there. He's an athletic freak. Jonathan Mingo, kind of the same thing.
Can't say words, but Xavier Leggett.
Yeah.
You ever heard him talk?
Yeah.
It's wild. It's like
Terrace
he's got a
Mark.
mouthful of chub.
Like
He's so
like I said, Chris Olave, top 10 potential. Rashid Shaheed, kind of a cool gadget player. A.T. Perry, Equinemius St. Brad. Like,
I mean,
I'm
throw
probably
Taysom
gonna-
Hill
it's
in there.
underwhelming.
Taysom Hill's in there too.
I mean, outside of Chris Olave, it's underwhelming.
yeah.
I would agree.
Like, don't get me wrong. I'm taking Olave over all those guys.
Oh, yeah.
100%. But if we're looking in terms of
Yeah.
totality, but I mean, the Saints suck.
Yeah.
I'm just not even going to try and be nice anymore. All right, so NFC South, just to recap, me and Josie are going Atlanta, Naples is going Tampa. And Josie, I think I speak for both of us when I say, even though you and I are going Atlanta, we want Tampa Bay to win that division.
I would agree.
So don't hate us, David. David's watching loyally. All right, Naples, what's next?
Let's do West,
West?
because I think NFC North's the most interesting division to talk about.
All right, go for it.
I like the Rams. I think that back-to-back years the Niners win the division. I think that divisions tend to switch up. Like, it's not other than anomalies, right? Like, there's teams like, the Chiefs will probably win that division. I mean, maybe the Chargers get one in the next couple years, but other than that, like, I think the Rams are the team that's competing with the Niners for that division. I think it would not shock me if the Rams won 11 or 12 games, even had the same amount of wins as the Niners and had the tiebreaker. Like, the Rams play the Niners extremely well. They're well coached. Like, Matt Stafford's still Matt Stafford. And from everything that I've heard, Cooper Kupp he's going to have another really good season.
He's
He's back. He's back.
Mr. Josiah.
Yeah. I mean, I like the Rams this year, but I mean, there's the Niners are winning this division. Like, I as much as I do like the Rams, and I think that they could be a wild card team.
Yeah.
They should be a wild card team again this year. I mean,
Well, what do you think the ceiling for wins is for the Rams?
the ceiling 12.
Okay.
They could win 12 games.
Okay, and do you think that
I think
it's-
that the 49ers could win 15.
you think they could win 15?
I think the 49ers
Oh,
could win 15
All
games
right.
this year. I think that Kyle Shanahan might be the greatest regular season coach we've ever seen. in the history of watching football. Kyle Shanahan in the regular season, his win-loss record has to be
when he has
absolutely
his starting
insane.
quarterback.
Yeah, exactly.
Because his record's actually not as good as you think. Because you have to
'cause he
remember
had
there's
some
some
years,
C.J. Beathard,
yeah.
Nick
Oh,
Mullins
okay.
years,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that weighs him. That Brian
That's
Hoyer
valid.
before Jimmy G. Yeah.
But
But
like,
I get
when-
what you're saying. When he has a true number one guy, yeah.
Exactly. And like I just think that the way he coaches in the regular season, I don't know what the difference is in the postseason or specifically when he gets to the NFC Championship.
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
the
say
Super
because
Bowl, like,
they don't even play bad in the playoffs. Like
yeah, they don't. They can't win that game and like
They can't beat Patrick Mahomes.
yeah, and like
That's
when,
what it is.
well, they also couldn't beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl when they were up 28-3 when he
You
was
can't
the
beat the
offensive
two
coordinator.
greatest quarterbacks.
Okay, but yeah, that's looking at a very small detail of the fact that they were up 28-3 over a team that
Yeah.
they should not have lost to.
he wasn't
being up
he wasn't
25
was he the
points.
coach or just the OC?
He was the OC,
OC.
but I mean, you look at what they did the year after he left. He made Matt Ryan an MVP.
Yeah, well, I think part of that wasn't even on Shanahan because he wasn't the one calling the plays, but or like, well,
Yeah,
he wasn't the head
He
coach
didn't
like
run the
calling the
ball.
game plan.
He
though?
doesn't run the ball in the second half when he's up.
Yeah.
He won't. He will not run the football. But we're getting off topic.
Okay, yeah.
I think that the San Francisco 49ers win this division.
I just think it's a lot closer in terms of wins than you think, and I think like as far as teams go, like it's really tough for any team I think to win 14 or 15 games.
Yeah,
I feel like
agree.
12, 13's that like top half of the league. Same way like you wouldn't predict teams to only win 0 like or one or two wins. Like we always end around that 4 or 5
What
number.
team did we predict to go like 1-16 this year?
I don't
When we were like going.
I don't remember.
Because that's like what made Josie mad. Was it the Raiders?
No, it was the Colts at 3 and 14.
The Colts at 3 and 14 was absolutely.
Josie walked out of his living
He
room.
was so mad.
I-
Flustered.
The Niners are winning this division. I love the Rams. And there's two reasons why I don't think the Rams really have too much of a shot. One, Kyle Shanahan owns Sean McVay, 10-5 record, and that's including games where Shanahan was resting starters. So Shanahan owns
What is the
McVay
record? 10 and what?
10-5. So he's
Yeah.
twice as many wins. Matthew Stafford also I think is banged up, and I do not trust Jimmy G or Stetson Bennett as a number 2 quarterback on a roster that good. Don't get me wrong, we're going to go through our wild card teams right after we do the NFC North, but this is the Niners, and it's going to take a Brock Purdy injury or a Brock Purdy meltdown for me to say otherwise. Heck, if Josh Dobbs is in there, I still think that they have a chance to win the division.
Yeah. Josh Dobbs for is he in the
Niners. He's the Niners number 2.
The Dauber.
Yeah.
All right, NFC
Steelers
North.
legend.
I do. Hold on, before I say, I do slightly take. I still take the Rams, but Matthew Stafford is 1-8 versus the Niners in his career, so I won't.
10-5 and 1-8 are pretty lopsided records for sure.
Yeah, and I mean obviously some of that's with the Lions, but
Yeah, but
1-8's kind of.
You want to go first for the North?
I'll go last.
I know where you're not going.
I'll go last.
well, I'm going last. But
Oh, okay. I'll go first. I'll lay down. I'll go first.
Foundation.
For me, really, it's between the two teams. It's between the Lions and the Packers. I mean, we talked about it earlier. Like, do we think that the Lions have the best roster in the league? So I think that makes me think Lions. I could see the Green Bay Packers being really good again this year, but like, I think that the Lions win this division again, which would be the second time in 30 years, right? Because last year was the first time in 30 years that they won the division.
yeah, so it would be this.
And then, so this would be the second time in 30 years that they win the division, and they do it back to back. I just don't think there's a reason to believe that the Lions are going to fall off all that hard.
Yeah.
I think after they lost last year, everybody's like, oh, this was their window. Like, they're not going to be as good next year. It's like, why? Why are they not going to be as good next year?
Yeah.
I would argue that they might be better this year because of how they improved their secondary.
Yeah.
So I think that the Lions are the answer here.
Naples, I can go. You can go
Oh.
last. I'll be nice.
I don't think he's going to go Lions anyway.
So
Huh?
I think he's going to go Lions anyway.
Yeah.
I am gonna go Lions. Like Josie said, I think all 4 teams have a shot at least to win it. I think the Lions might have the best roster in the NFL in totality. They're well coached. They have great coordinators, a great head coach. I think they're going to be hungry. I think Detroit wins it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I agree. I think Detroit is like honestly, like I think Detroit wins the division, and I don't even think it's close. I think they wrap up the division by like week 15, which like I mean isn't like super far ahead in like to the end of the season, but that's pretty yeah. But I think all the other teams, from my eyes, I know you guys are higher on the Packers than I am, and I honestly think the Packers finish like it's them or the Vikings for last in the division. I think the Packers could easily finish like 6-11.
What do you think the Bears go?
I think
500?
I think the Bears are in that 7-8 win range, 7-8 maybe 9, but like they're in that same range. I think the Vikings are in that same 7. If Sam Darnold is like can play okay, like if Sam Darnold stinks, like they're winning like 3 games. But I don't know. I think the Packers start with like kind of a frisky schedule. They get a couple easy games and then they go right into a tough spin of like 5 or 6 games.
Start with the Eagles.
Yeah, they start with
the Eagles week 1.
They start with the Eagles in Brazil. I think that's a loss. Then they go and they play the Colts and then the Titans. I think they split that. I think they start 1-2. Who's like their next like 4 or 5 games?
Then they got the Vikings at home. They go to LA to face the Rams, home against the Cardinals, and then home at the Texans.
Yeah, I was gonna say I know they play the Rams, the Texans, the Niners, and then they play. I think they play the Saints and the Dolphins somewhere in that stretch. Like they go on a run of like playing some pretty difficult teams.
Well, the Saints aren't difficult.
Well, I mean defensively.
They do play the Saints and the Dolphins later in the year, November and December. But
yeah, but I think they go on a pretty like hard stretch of games, and I don't know. I don't know if Jordan Love's is battle tested to go against some of those teams and those coaches that like I would feel like like the Packers are gonna win these games. Like I feel like they would lose more than win.
Where do they play Miami? At Lambeau?
I think that's in Lambeau.
I mean, Miami can't play outdoor.
it's a
in the winter.
primetime game too.
Yeah, they can't. Miami can't. That's a win there.
They can run the ball.
What about
November-
the Saints?
November
Yeah, but the Miami can
28th.
run the ball. They don't need to throw the ball.
I mean, they're gonna have to at some point.
Yeah.
Saints play at Lambeau as well, and that's another primetime
The
game.
Saints can't win outside the dome. Even when Drew Brees was there, they can't win outside their dome. So I mean, I think that those are both ups. But
Both cold nights in Lambeau.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We'll see.
That's. I mean, that might be the highest competitive advantage in the entire league. Cold night in Lambeau. Like, I mean, teams don't come in and win when it's cold.
When Aaron Rodgers was there.
Cold night
Yeah.
in
I mean, yeah. What'd you
cold
say?
night in Arrowhead, I think probably.
I mean, yeah, they're on the same level
A
in my
brisk
head.
night.
Like back when Minnesota didn't have a dome, a cold night in Minnesota, like you can barely move
I
your
love how
bones.
we're
Like-
saying this. Cold night.
Yeah.
A brisk evening.
It's like a John Ferranda like opening, like a... All right, quick recap of your 4 division winners, and then we'll get into our wild card teams.
So I went Eagles, Falcons, Lions, Niners.
I got Lions, Bucks, Eagles, and Rams.
I got Falcons, Lions, Eagles, and Niners. But all right, wild card teams. Josie, give me one of your wild card teams.
To make it to a wild card game.
Yeah, one of your 3 wild card
Yeah.
spots.
I mean, I already talked about it a little bit, but the Rams. I think the Rams are a really good team in a division, and they're not going to win.
I'll build off of that too. Rams.
And to flip off of that, since I have the Rams in the division, I think the Niners are the first wild card team in.
I think that there are 2 very clear wild card spots,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think that third one is kind of like, I don't
Yeah.
know where that one's gonna go.
Yeah.
But, all right, second wild card team.
I'll be basic again. I kind of already mentioned it. I do think that the Cowboys take a step off this year, but I still think that they're a wild card team.
I agree. I think Dallas is the next wild card team. They're probably at like at least 10 wins. I'd be surprised if they didn't get to 10. Like 10-7 feels really Dallas this year. And then I think Philly gets to 11 or 12. If not more. If not more.
I think Philly's higher than that.
I mean, their
But I'm also
schedule. I know
biased,
we looked at
so,
their schedule
yeah.
and like we know
They've
their
got
schedule. Like
Cupcakes.
we wouldn't be surprised at 17-0, but like I think 14's the floor. You know.
Yeah.
We would be a little.
We would be jumping for joy. Is what
Yes,
we'd be
yes,
doing.
that's right.
Packers are my second wild card team. I think Jordan Love is a sleeper for MVP. I think Matt LaFleur is one of the better coaches in the league. Brian Gutekunst has done a great job of building that roster on both sides of the football.
For my final spot, it's really between 2 teams what I'm looking at here. So it's between my heart wanting to go Tampa Bay Buccaneers and my mind saying it's going to be the Green Bay Packers. So I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers there because as much as I want the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I don't think two teams from the South make the playoffs. Like, realistically, I took the Falcons as the winners of the division. The rest of them are probably going under 500, and the Packers are not going under 500 in my opinion. So I'm going to go with the Packers. So my three were the Packers, the Cowboys, and the Rams.
For me, I'm looking at three teams. We talked about them a lot, like not just like wild card teams, but like wild card teams. And so, like, I'm looking at the Falcons, I'm looking at the Commanders, I'm looking at the Cardinals. I don't think the Commanders get there in year one. So, like, I'm really looking at the Cardinals and the Falcons. Like I said earlier, I think the Cardinals are a really sneaky, like, 9-win team. Like, they're over-under for the season 7.5. So, like, it wouldn't surprise me if they got 9 and 8 and were that last wild card spot, especially with, like, I think they're a better team than Geno Smith-led Seahawks. Kirk Cousins off an Achilles is what really scares me about the Falcons. Like,
Is he about to pick the Cardinals?
I think the Cardinals is my third wild card team.
I like it. What hot take? I
It's
like it.
bold. Again, I like the Cardinals this year too.
Yeah,
I think we've
like-
talked about this not
Yeah,
on
like-
camera, but like I think if Kyler can stay healthy all year, they'll be a decent team.
Yeah, like they're good.
They're well coached.
Yeah.
With that said, I still think Jonathan Gannon gets fired after this year. But I think he.
Not if they make a wild card.
Well, yeah.
yeah.
Alright, so Naples, your three teams.
They were the Niners, the Cardinals, and Dallas.
Dallas.
But I think we get the three teams from the NFC West, and I think like that is the best division in the NFC, in my opinion.
And then Naples. Last week you were. I forget. It might have been Josie actually. Josie, you said all four teams in the AFC North were making the
that
playoffs.
was my
Okay.
bold prediction.
So.
I said that all three wild card teams were from AFC North.
Yeah. So.
And I think I had the Bengals winning, so the other three
Yeah.
were.
Yeah, I think you and I agreed on Cincy.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
like I said, I think Green Bay and who's the other one that I said was obvious? Oh, Green Bay and the Rams are the obvious choices unless there's a huge injury. I think that third spot's really up for grabs, so I'm just going to go through and eliminate. I don't see Seattle or Arizona being able to compete. Dallas, probably the chalk answer, which would lead me to having the same three teams as Josie. The Giants, not going to happen. The Bears and the Commanders, like I said at the very beginning, I could see it happening, kind of a Texans-like story. Could also see Minnesota with Sam Darnold. I think it comes down to either Minnesota or Dallas.
You had the Lions winning, right? So you're not going to. Oh, you took the Packers.
Packers,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. Yeah, you did say that.
It's boring. I'm going to go Dallas. I could, and I think that Minnesota record still probably is around 500. Sam Darnold has a Pro Bowl alternate type season. Just probably the more basic answer, but I can see it happening. I think Mike McCarthy's good enough. I think Dak Prescott's good enough to carry that team a little bit higher than what they should because I'm not impressed with their roster really on either side of the football.
In Dak's last year, and imagine the Cowboys missed the playoffs in Dak's last year in Dallas.
And then Dak becomes the highest paid player of all time.
And then he
with
goes to
the
Seattle.
Raiders. I think it's the Raiders. I think the
I
Raiders
know
are
we
going
were
to
just.
pull all
I,
this
know
I
off.
think
we were
both
just-
of the-
we were
I think
just
both of
talking
those
about
are-
Seattle though, because like if he goes to Seattle and has DK and Nick Jigba and like dude, like that offense would
Kenneth
go.
Walker.
He makes Kenneth Walker better. He makes
Oh my
Zach
god!
Charbonnet
Like
better.
they would. That
immediately.
offense would.
And their
Hum.
defense is young and
Oh, yeah.
talented. I mean,
I think
my pick
think
for defensive rookie of the year is on there. Is on.
don't
Dallas.
say it with your edge just a little bit. We're not going there yet.
Well, I mean, I kind of just gave the answer, but go ahead. Yeah, go on. We'll move on.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. But so that's been our NFC preview. If you want to hear our AFC preview, it's in our videos for YouTube and Spotify. We have a little bit of a fun episode coming up for you next week. The week after that will be our award predictions. Josie can talk about our favorite player on the Seahawks. But this has been the Second Short Podcast. We'll see you next time.